Alan, a mysterious apothecary with an unknown background, happened to find an elf so brutally tortured that she was at death's door, waiting to be free from her long, painful life. However, by fate, they intertwined, and a tale of healing began. The story begins where a man helps a timid young kid by placing a band-aid on his knee. With a calm voice, he tells the little kid to be careful and watch out for sharp rocks, and the kid's face brightens up, and they run off, while thanking the kind man. Alan, an apothecary with unknown origins, was a master at healing and has a hidden past. As he strolls in the street of a busy market, a shop owner notices him and with a loud voice calls out to him and leads him to a room, where he sees the work of humans so painful and merciless that it leaves him shaken to his core. An elf was sitting there, with no situational awareness or anything, almost dead and unresponsive. On every inch of her body were marks and scars of tortures that she endured and must have lasted for several years, if not decades. Her ears had horrible holes, and her skin had hollow, rough scars of a whip, indicating that she healed her scars without any medicine or treatment. Instead, the healing process was slow and painful, and noticeable. Despite all the horrible things she endured, she could somewhat hear the things going on around her. The shop owner convinces him, but Alan decided to check the poor soul's condition by himself. As he poured magic into his finger, he saw that the torturer made sure to leave nothing attached to her. Her teeth were ripped from her mouth, the gangrene was slowly reaching her other organs and tissue, her left eye was plucked out, and her fingernails were plucked as well. She was in such a state that she was just waiting to die so the pain would stop. As Alan couldn't believe the hideous things she had to endure all her life, the girl muttered with an absolutely painful and cracking voice that she wanted to go back to her home. Mustering up the courage and drinking his bloodthirst and anger, he decides to take her with him. Alan covers her up properly and makes sure that along the way she would be protected. Since their way back home was long, and Alan lived on the other side of the mountain, as he carried her on his back, he ignored all the rubbish the shop owner spewed and went on his journey. Going back to his home takes around 2 days, and as he stopped at the top of the mountain to rest there for the night, he fed her with a thin and liquid type of food that was specifically made this way so she could eat since all her teeth were not there. She ate her food with no complaint, but he noticed that her expression slightly improved as they left the sickening city that must have done this to her. As she ate, she cried to eat something warm after so long. However, in the night, she was at the brink of death. She let out heavy breaths, indicating that she was suffering and gasping for the tiny bit of air that she could take, and all her body sweated. As Alan was not sure which problem of hers was causing her to be like this, he quickly crafted something that could help her for the time being. The medicine worked wonders, and there she calmed down a bit, and the situation was under control. Sitting there, Alan realizes that nothing he can do really justifies anything, as it is likely that her situation was caused by humans like him, and he himself had a bloody past where he slew countless people, and now they haunted him when he would relax and think about them. His last resort is to help her just enough so she could stand on her own and meet her family, and return back to her home. As this was to take a lot from him, in the morning, he vows to the elf and names her Resser and tells her that she was hurt not physically but in the heart and soul. The pain and misery would take time to heal. As he gives her the name, he tells her that he will heal her no matter what, and she will be reborn into a different person and surely make it back to her home safe and sound. As she stared, it was clear that she was blind, however, she could somewhat hear him. Her painful and sorrowful face must have been waiting ages to hear such words. After their long journey, Alan brought her to his home and decided to wash her and dress her properly. However, he didn't have any clothes for a woman. Alan was a well-known apothecary, and his neighbors deeply respected him. He rushed to a nearby house where a timid young kid and her mother helped him out. He knew he needed to wash her gently, ensuring he didn't hurt her in any way. He filled the tub with warm water and removed her old and ragged clothes, and covering her front. As he glanced back to see her back, he was sure this girl had suffered in hell. Her slender figure had long, thick, and uneven scars, intense and deep, from different whips used in torture. On her neck were clearly visible finger marks, showing someone had choked her again and again for a long period. As he watched her, he begged for mercy in his mind, and he could barely hold back his anger. He needed to treat her injuries as fast as possible. He made a treatment that would have to be repeated every 3 days to improve healing, and would aid her own body in healing unfinished scars. He decided to dress her up and covered her body with warm clothes. When he did, he also noticed that his neighbors had included a woman's comb. He combed her long hair, and when he finished everything, he saw an elegant, beautiful, and elven elf sitting there. He wondered to himself what kind of person she could have been in the past. The significant change in her appearance was very noticeable, and Alan was ready to eat the food now, after which he wanted to sleep. But he noticed that Resser was shaking a little too aggressively, as if she was holding back something. Alan couldn't seem to grasp the idea and asked her if she was hurt, but later realized that she wanted to use the toilet. He held her in his arms and ran towards the toilet. Although she was completely emotionless throughout the journey and even while undressing her, he found it strange that she seemed shy about her dignity, but not about being undressed. As he reflected on what to do, he was ready to make small, meaningful changes in her diet that could help her recover. However, one main problem still lingered: the infection in her arms was spreading too fast. If the situation worsened, the only option left would be to cut off her arms and legs to prevent her from dying. One of Alan's friends was an expert in such treatments. Although he considered this, he took Resser to a bed after they finished their food. With dozy and sleepy eyes, she slept, and Alan, though to himself, that he could have avoided all this trouble if he had the hidden treasure of the elves, a high-end healing potions that could heal everything Resser suffered from. However, whether it existed was still a mystery. He was pondering all this as he went to sleep right next to her. In the morning, Alan continued his regular activities and gardening. Resser was sitting on a chair, enjoying the sunlight and fresh air. Alan seemed to attach a letter to a crow and fed it some beans, after which he sent it off to someone. He let Resser know that he would be busy working in the field. A gentle and refreshing burst of breeze cooled off the atmosphere. Resser, being able to smell, sniffed, and immediately tears formed in her eyes, and she wept for her long-lost home that she was missing more than anything. Alan heard her sobbing and kept working. Later, a tiny, timid, and cheerful person visited Alan. Moan greeted Alan and eagerly looked around, ready to meet her new friend. There she sat next to Resser and started to talk to her. Alan smiled as he thought to himself that interacting with others was going to help her a lot. He was busy crafting a pair of teeth that he would give Resser. After some time, Moan was sad since her new friend, who she thought would love her, was completely silent all this time. Alan told her that her heart was closed to strangers and perhaps she was waiting for the right time to speak. Hearing this, Moan left the place and after a few minutes yelled at the top of her lungs and called out to Alan. There, Resser had a beautiful crown of flowers on top of her head, and it made it seem like Resser was a princess of some sorts. Alan praised Moan's skill, and Moan started to tease Alan, telling him that Resser was surely going to be his new wife that he cared for a lot. As he panicked to hear this, the clever little Moan left with cheerful and beautiful smiles. These moments were a primary thing that could help Resser from the inside, and Alan started his regular checkup, carefully replacing the silk fluid band-aid on her wounds. This time, he crafted a perfect set of teeth that would help her to eat and chew food properly. As he made this, he made a bold announcement, telling her that today they were going to celebrate. That day, Alan ordered meat and made a delicious steak for her, making sure to cut it into bite-sized pieces and fed her slowly. Drool overflowed as she couldn't believe what she had just eaten. She ate without stopping, and thick tears dropped from her eyes as she had never in her life thought that she would have such a blessing. And Alan muttered to her, "Being able to eat makes you happy, Resser?" Since that day, Alan continued to feed her good food and noticed that she showed slight changes, and her sensitivity increased. Her appetite also improved. He came out of the kitchen, letting Resser know that they would be having bacon. Resser fell to the floor, coughing pitch black tar and blood. Her improved condition all crumbled, and she was one step closer to a coma. Alan couldn't believe how someone could become this ill so fast. He noticed strange patterns. Her chest became very red, her eyes became bloodshot, and she had spasms that made her breathing a hell. This was a poison attack, specially made with an obsidian spider. Its venom was used to craft assassination poison. He quickly crafted something to heal her and fed her a temporary fix. As she drank it, she threw up, and there Alan saw a pill engraved with curse marks that were solely made in such a way that the moment Resser would be away from them for a period, the pill would dissolve in her stomach automatically, and she would suffocate to death, and no blame would fall on them. As he reflected on such a heartless torture method, Alan couldn't hold back, and a sudden rush of anger almost blinded him. However, there were bigger problems ahead. He needed to heal her as soon as possible and create an antidote fast. Later, he called Ain and Moan there to help. Poor little Moan was weeping because her new friend was too ill to even move. Despite Alan being shaken and weak, Ain comforted him and reassured him that nobody wants to die and there is always a will to fight. He mustered and gathered every bit of courage he had and told Resser to hold on tight, promising to return soon with a cure. The journey to create this antidote was easily going to take 3 days, and Alan made sure that Resser would be cared for during that time. He slowly gathered all the ingredients, and lastly, he would need to extract a raw venom sample from the spider itself. The threatening-looking den was home to such a spider. While preparing, he grabbed a bough and readied himself. Making his way inside the dark and gloomy cave, he located some small animals which the spider had trapped. And there, a threatening-looking spider with dozens of eyes and a hairy but sturdy, rock-like body stood, ready to crush Alan with a stroke of its powerful arms. As Alan drew the bow, he remembered how with a single strike he could kill it without any problem, but he reflected that he had used this skill to kill civilians as well. He let go, and the arrow failed to make a single dent in the spider. Remembering why he was fighting, he drew the bow again and muttered a magic spell. On the tip of the arrow, a magic circle appeared, and a second later, lightning flashed from the spell. Alan followed with more strikes and took down the hideous beast, finally taking the venom from its smelly gland. While carefully crafting the antidote, he poured the mixture into a tooth-shaped syringe and injected Resser with it. The medicine worked instantaneously, and Resser was finally able to breathe after 3 hellish days. We get a perspective view of Resser, who saw nothing but darkness all her life, and from the day she began to experience the warmth of Alan, she could figure that a gentle hand was there to pull her from the evil and depths she was buried in for so long. In the morning, Resser opened her eyes, and the bright rays of the sun fell on them. She muttered the word, light, to herself. As Alan was right next to her the whole time, monitoring her, he heard these words and tried hard to think about what to say. He asked if she could see him clearly, and with a weak voice she let him know that she could somewhat feel his presence, but she couldn't really see. Alan was sure that her eyesight would likely improve. All the terrible symptoms that she suffered from disappeared, and with a trembling voice she managed to form a sentence and asked Alan if she was Resser, who he had been calling earlier. He let her know that he didn't have a clue what her real name was and decided to give her a temporary name. As he said this, he added that he would very much like to call her by her actual name, and she told Alan in a weak manner that she couldn't remember anything. As he realized that she had just gone through a serious memory loss phase, he broke down, thinking how the hell would he be able to bring her back to her home safe, as elves are hidden, and only their species really know the way home. Resser muttered kind words of thanks, letting him know that everything he had done for her was nothing but mercy. Alan reflected that maybe he was being too pessimistic, and made his goal to help Resser recover faster. As they both glanced at each other, Resser couldn't help but smile, as her life was about to be changed by a broken human. She could only hope for the best for him and herself. As time passed and a few days went by, we see Ain and Moan's mother look back, and with a beautiful and cheerful expression, ask if Resser likes sweets. It seemed like Ain was throwing a small party for the miracle recovery of Resser, and baking a cake was something everyone agreed on. As our scene shifts from Ain to Resser, there she sat, and with a light and timid voice she muttered, telling Ain that she likes sweets the most. Moan, right next to her, exclaimed with pure joy and happiness. However, it was clear that Moan was very attached and seemed to be rearranging Resser's hair. Resser had much better clothes now. Alan, with a weary voice, offered to help and was about to come and help Ain, but Ain completely changed and sat him down on the chair with sheer brute force, and Alan grunted in pain. Even Resser exclaimed through her ears. She let Alan know that he needed to sleep as it had been days since he last slept, and he had been pushing himself a lot. Moan became an aggressive, bloodthirsty cat herself as well, letting him know that he had deep dark bags under his eyes. As he himself asked if his condition was that bad, both exclaimed in agreement. There, we see that repeated adventures and fighting, also monitoring Resser, had taken a great toll on his body. Ain told him that even though Resser woke up from the poisoned slumber, if he were to fall down, none of them would have any idea what to do. She offered him a cup of tea with steam coming from the top, and with a reassuring voice she let him know that everyone needs help sometimes, just make sure that Alan leaves some work for them as well. As these words moved Alan, he looked at her and grabbed the cup, thanking Ain for always being there when he needed help. Finally resting his eyes, he sipped the warm tea and relaxed himself, reflecting on things. He couldn't help but stare at Resser, who was in a much better condition. All his sacrifices had borne fruit, and Resser was able to slowly heal, and a timid, young, and innocent girl reappeared. Her smile made a great impact on Alan, and as he saw her happier than before, he was happy and slowly closed his eyes to rest. Suddenly, a flashback flowed through his mind. There, a young, small boy was running while panting for big, long breaths and held something near his chest very tight. Instantly, a big and hairy arm grabbed his clothes and shook him completely. As the boy fell down from the angry pull, two adult men took their time to beat the boy brutally with fists hammering down on his face, and both of them yelling that if he thought he was a boy and safe, he was wrong. One of the men kicked his guts, and it was clear that Alan had stolen some small pieces of bread and got caught by the villagers. This was a normal day-to-day life for him. Kids from the village treated him no differently as well, as Alan was a practiced target for them and would constantly get hurt by thick rocks flying at his head. This time, the beating was harsher than normal, and Alan, trembling, walked while holding his arm from the excruciating pain. He sat under a big tree, clutching himself, knowing this was another day he would go hungry. Alan was an orphan, and as he looked at the grass with dead eyes, ready to crumble, he noticed strange boots. Alan noticed this and slowly glared at the head of the person, seeing long, sharp horns. The man leaned on Alan and with a warm voice asked him why he was all alone when all the other kids were chubby and happy, and asked if he was hungry. And there, Alan met the first person to ever show him kindness, a demon with white hair and a muscular form, offering his hand and telling Alan to come with him, and he would feed him. As poor Alan heard these words, his malnourished face saw light and warmth, and it came from a different species. Alan's lips were dried out, and his face was so thin that his cheekbones were visible. Without any question, young Alan grabbed onto the hand of the giant demon who offered him food, unaware of anything else. The gentle demon filled Alan's bowl with delicious food all the way to the top, and without stopping, he ate the hot food without any pause and sat right next to him. Alan held the bowl right under his face and made sure to gulp up every bit, and the demon let him know to eat slowly. With a beautiful smile, he asked Alan if the food was good. We get the present where he opens his eyes and sees Moan feeding Resser something, and as she ate the cake, her pointy ears trembled and moved from the taste, and around her mouth was cake. With a cheerful expression, she let out a cracking sentence, telling Moan that it was very sweet and warm. As Alan saw this, he couldn't help but remember the thankful expression he had when he ate the soup the gentle demon fed him. Alan smiled at the demon with a beautiful and innocent smile, letting him know that the soup was delicious. Tears began to form in his eyes as he remembered this, and seeing the sight ahead of him reminded him of how the demon helped him, and how he helped the helpless himself. With a regretful expression, he muttered to himself that thanks to someone else, he was alive and breathing. Time passed, and as Alan himself enjoyed the cake, a crow approached the window as their chatter inside went on. The clever crow knocked on the window, and Alan noticed this immediately. A note was delivered by the crow. He rushed to the window to check, and Ain asked if everything was okay. He replied that it was a message from an old friend and opened the note to read that his friend, who he thought to ask for help earlier, wrote back to him, letting Alan know that for him, it had been a while since he examined an elf body, but he was very much interested to study her case. While adding this, his friend also asked for money. Strangely, he figured that Alan always saved up money. Alan reflected that he was always crude. He glanced at Resser and was sure that he could not skip this step as it was important for Resser to get a proper diagnosis for her arms and legs. If the condition was poor, then amputation would be the last resort for them. Packing a few days' worth of food and bracing themselves, they departed to Alan's friend's place. Both Moan and Ain wished them the best, and Moan made sure that Resser would not come back home empty-handed no matter what. This time, Resser had a different elegant dress and was fully covered from top to bottom, wearing warm clothes. Alan waved them goodbye as they left for a long journey. Alan explained to Resser that his friend was someone very knowledgeable but happened to live pretty far, and they would need to travel all the way to the northern region just to meet him. Their journey was going to be simple. First, their task was to safely cross the thick monster forest, which was the most deadly part of the journey. Inside the forest, monsters ranged from different kinds and power levels. Next, they would need to locate the Karuga town in the mountains, which could be difficult but would save them months of traveling, as inside the town, they would use the dimensional portal that would instantly teleport them to the northern border, and there he could travel to his friend's town. As Resser herself was not aware of how humans travel, she muttered, "Portal," and after Alan's explanation, she seemed to grasp the concept. Alan added that there was a very special necklace around Resser's neck. This magic item would reflect Resser's emotional level. Whenever she would frown and was in distress, the necklace would shine from the magic power that she was always emitting. As she noticed this as well, Alan added further that it was unlikely that they would really be troubled in that way. However, it was just for safety measures, and Resser should really know about this. As Resser replied with a yes, Alan walked and walked, deep inside the forest. While hearing Alan's panting, she muttered to him, "Sorry for being heavy." As she said this with a sad expression, Alan let her know that there was no way she should be thinking that way, as he was used to carrying heavy bags, and Resser's weight was not a problem for him at all. As he said this in a comforting manner, Resser blushed slightly and was somewhat shy to hear this. Soon it was nightfall, and Alan told Resser that it was best for them to make this place their camp for the night. They settled down, and Alan prepared food for the two of them. As they sat there near the fire, both were surrounded by silence, and they themselves found it difficult to really talk. Alan reflected that although she was able to talk, there was nothing that came to his mind that could start a conversation between them. As he thought of this, Resser with a weak voice muttered something and asked if she could know the name of her savior. As he heard this, he was shocked and realized that he never really talked down with her. As he thought of something and decided to answer, Resser readied herself, and Alan told her that she should call him Kusuriuri. As he said this while looking the other way, it was clear that he hid his name from her, as the word Kusuriuri means medicine seller. Alan lied to Resser about his real identity, and the innocent Resser was so happy to hear this, and her pointy ears twitched. With a beautiful smile, she told him that she would try her best to remember his name no matter what, and told him that she was very glad to meet him. In guilt, he replied and let her know as well that he was happy himself, and deep down he was broken, thinking to himself that this was the right path, she should never know his real face and past. As thoughts surrounded him, his past started to haunt him again, as terrifying hands started to grab him, and he knew himself that he was a lowlife and there was no worth to him. She should never learn his real identity, and he must protect her and heal her so she could get back to her home. This was his only task. He was sure that his actions and past would label him as something worse than human. Suddenly, his attention was grabbed, and he heard a rustling sound from the back. Alan immediately and instinctively grabbed the knife right next to him, and readied himself to attack and defend both himself and her. There, a threatening and deafening figure of a grizzly stunned both of them as it made its way near them. This bear was the king grizzly, which was supposed to be in hibernation. As the bear approached them and steam left its mouth, it was ready to attack and rip anything in front of it. Alan was speechless, as these bears would be very brutal and ferocious before their hibernation. However, his biggest concern was that there was no way he could fight while defending someone, and he couldn't run as well. The best choice for him was to fight and see if he could survive with minor injuries. As the bear launched itself, Alan dashed himself aside. However, Resser enhanced her voice with magic and sang a beautiful song, which filled everything around them in harmony and peace. As the bear heard this, it calmed down, and all its defensiveness and aggression left. The bear lost interest and left them without taking another step near Alan, and Resser reassured Alan to relax. He saw that Resser had talked with the bear. He glanced back and was sure that she had just used the forest dweller's inherent power. He asked her if she was always able to communicate with the animals, and she frowned, telling him that she herself didn't know if she could do that. But when she saw Alan trembling and worried, she couldn't hold back and wanted to help no matter what. Alan, as he heard this, questioned it, but he knelt down and thanked Resser for saving his life, as he himself knew that fighting that bear would surely have hurt him a lot, and she was able to save him with just her voice. As she smiled, Alan noticed that the king grizzly bear was a main predator to the majority of the beasts in the forest, and it was clear that it was scared for its life. As he looked at the creepy and dark forest, he questioned just what was happening inside the forest.